Okay, so we thought that just before, in the build up to our next conference, which is coming in November, we thought that we would do this session on what are the trends that we see in terms of the abstracts, and how can we write better abstracts to to attract a full room of delegates. Um, so. One of the things that I think we need to just really think through quickly is who is going to be attending the conference. And there is a difference between conferences in our own field and conferences in LCT. So, and that difference makes a difference in how you write your abstracts. So, when you are doing conferences in your own field, you're generally speaking to people who have the same kind of interest in you, who understand the literature, who understand the existing debates, who understand or who are familiar with, at least, key terminology, the abbreviations you use. But what you're going to be doing in your own field is you're bringing diverse frameworks, diverse methodologies to the same topic or similar topics. LCT conferences are very different, and I want to just talk about what makes LCT conferences special. So, actually, there's lots of things that make LCT conferences special. One is the amount of mentoring that we work with. Carl and I really work with giving a lot of detailed feedback on abstracts and so on, so that you can attract the biggest possible audience for your presentation. So the one thing that I want to say is that LCT conferences happen every second year, and there's method in the madness there. Um, is that we don't want to become a community that we only speak LCT to each other. It's really important to share your ideas, share your research both with your own field of practice, but also come and show us and each other what you're doing with LCT and how you're using it in your field. So, because of that, LCT is a framework that is being used across all kinds of fields, from ballet to medicine to teacher education to science to maths to um, all, all kinds of law, policing, all kinds of fields. So it's a very much going to be a multidisciplinary conference where not everybody is in your field of practice. And so the thing that makes difference an LCT conference different is that although we share a common framework, we have very different fields of expertise. Um, so you can't assume that people know the burning idea or the burning debate in your field of practice.
Lee,
So
I'm going to add to that to say that that's also true of just about every major international conference that you might go to at a discipline level. So if you went to an international sociological association conference or a European one or whatever it might be, something big, um, it's very unlikely that 99.9% of the people there have a clue about your tiny little topic or even your sub area of your discipline. They neither do they know about it nor do they care. And so you don't really want to start from there often, you know, um, because people just think, well, that's not my topic, and they just sort of move on, you know. So I think that what Lee's going to talk about is going to be relevant just well beyond LCT. It's very, very relevant to LCT, but will be relevant to all conferences that are big like that.
mm, thanks, Cole. So although we are using the common framework, we've got different levels of understanding in the delegates who come. So some people are really interested in LCT, but are there to learn and want to see and learn about it. So, and you've got other people who've been using LCT for years with quite an in-depth understanding. So the one thing is that don't assume that everybody understands what a semantic wave is. Um, many will, but not everybody. So you need to gloss over the concepts you use and the analytics you use, but then move on. So you gloss over them. And you would need to do that both at an LCT conference and in a conference in your field where people are bringing diverse frameworks, diverse methodologies. Um, LCT conferences are international, so people all over the world. I mean, already we've got abstracts submitted from about 10 different countries, which is brilliant. It really allows us to have this multidisciplinary, diverse international conversations with each other, and we've got a common language with which to do it. But because of the international nature of LCT, it's really important to be aware to avoid local terms, local abbreviations that have no meaning whatsoever beyond your curriculum, beyond your context. So, every South African knows what CAPS is. It's our national curriculum abbreviation. But to put CAPS in your abstract means nothing to most of the delegates. So we just got to be aware that we are talking to people about a field they don't know, a com a common framework, but maybe very, very differing levels of understanding, but also who come from a context beyond our own. And for LCT conferences, um, most of the people that attend are not actually going to be, as I say, from your field or from your country, but they're going to be interested in what are you doing with LCT? What are you doing with LCT in your field, in your practice, in your context? And what can you do that you couldn't do before? Or what did it reveal that gives you insight to do things better? So, I mean, I think that just holding those ideas together is kind of just going to frame the rest of our discussion. To bear in mind, LCT conferences are multidisciplinary, are international, and we are there to really understand what are you doing with the framework. So I want you to imagine that you're at a conference. You are looking at the program, and we do print our programs because I'm old school. Um, and you are faced with a whole lot of selections, and you are going to now need to decide where you're going to go in different sessions. So before you write your abstract, I want you to get into the head of a delegate who is at the conference, who is looking at the possibilities, the range of talks, and then making decisions about which ones I'm considering, which ones I'm not considering, and then what leads to those particular decisions. That's what I'm going to unpack. So if you look, some people will see a talk that looks very close to their research interest. What the topic is very close, and they're going to go and say, oh, for example, I'm in teacher education, and I might see somebody doing something interesting in teacher education, and I might pick them because it's a very, very close topic to mine. But that's unlikely. There are such diverse fields, such diverse topics. Um, there there might be sessions where you think, oh, wow, I am going to go to that session because they are using a tool from LCT or a concept from LCT that I'm really interested in. So, for example, if you're thinking about using autonomy and you just want to see how are other people using autonomy, that could be a factor that influences why you go to one session rather than another. It might be that you have been familiar with somebody's work and you're wanting to see what they're doing now. That might be a reason why you choose one session rather than another. But very often it's what grabs your interest. And what is the title? What is the abstract that really like, wow, I really want to go and hear more about this. I didn't think about it, but I'm really interested in that. And that's the sort of thing that I want to um, follow up today is how do you do abstracts and titles that grab the interest of the delegates? So I want to now invite you to have a look. I've given you five titles here. Um, and these are from conferences that we've held. We're about to have our sixth global conference. And I'd like you to read those and think about which session would you most likely pick and which one might you least likely pick? So I'm going to give you a minute or two to have a look at that. Okay, if all right, unmute your mic and just say yay. For those of you who would probably be most likely to pick number one.
Yes.
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 Most likely,
Yes.
okay. Most likely to pick number two.
Yes.
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 Well, the thing about number two is that they're acronyms that I don't know what they mean.
Aha.
Yeah.
And as
Agree.
compared to, for example, number one, I don't teach chemistry, but if I think about building knowledge in any subject through images, that could be relevant to what I teach. So I can kind of see relevance, but I cannot penetrate through the acronym in number two.
Okay, so for you that would be something like, okay, this is not something I don't have access to that.
Right, like it was not a talk designed for me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's really useful. Number three,
And
Yes.
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 it's probably the one I'd go to too, but because
Yeah.
it's aligned with my area of interest.
Yes.
Number four,
Yes.
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 okay. Number five, who would choose that one?
Yes.
Okay. So let's have a look at some of the strengths and some of the weaknesses of these. So which ones give you a clue about what LCT concepts are being used? Pavel said, building knowledge is probably implying semantics, I would imagine. Number
I would
Could be
not.
also specialization
It could
as
be.
well.
I would not assume that,
Okay.
since all dimensions can be used to help build
Yeah.
knowledge. So
Yeah.
that doesn't tell you a thing.
Okay.
Neither does 3, because code clashes are across all dimensions.
Code clashes
Yeah.
are
Agree.
number 2
Yes.
points to semantics. Number 4 points to constellations. Number 5 could be anything.
Could be anything, or if I can, I mean, it reminds me a bit of a study that Karl published with, I just remember one of the names, Chen. He looked at an Australian university and students from China, and so there was specialization. So I might think that it might be something similar, but it doesn't have to be specialization.
Could be anything.
All right. So I'm going to pick up on 2 of these examples in terms of the feedback that we gave them, and then how they adjusted them, how they adjusted the titles after the feedback. Oopsie, sorry. There we go. So what I think I'd like to point out to you is that where the focus of the paper is clear, that grabs people far more than a long-winded, unclear title. So keep it short.
Or a clever one. There was a recent study, I don't have the details of it, a recent study that showed that scientific papers that use lyrics or song titles in their titles are not cited as much as those that don't. And I'm glad to hear it, because it annoys the hell out of me to see people using Bob Dylan lyrics in every bloody title. Or those quotes. Another one that's really tedious is when there's quotes every time. It'll be like a quote from one of the participants, and I have no clue what that paper's about, and I just ignore it and move on. So they'll be like, teaching is like a drag bag of excitement or something, unquote. And I just think, oh, fuck that. I'm not reading that one. If you can't be bothered to tell me what that is in this attention economy, then I'm moving on.
Can I ask, by the focus of your paper being clear, so what I've noticed about titles, scientific articles, that they report what they did. Like, we focused on an interaction between, for example, X and Y, right? But not why the interaction was the focus, or what actually they found, or whether there was any meaning in looking, right, at the interaction. So would you prefer the title to be the finding or the so what, rather than just like success of students in a particular program, but doesn't tell you much about why you looked at it or whether the success was high or low?
Yeah.
Is it clear what I'm asking?
It is clear what you're asking. I think that the title is going to be too brief to pack in so much of that. But if you want to know, what is the big thing that you're discussing? Is it about curriculum design? Is it about student success? Is it about patient care? Is it about, it's that sort of thing what I'm talking about, the focus.
I wouldn't
Right,
give
but-
away the ending, Pavel. I mean, like, I consider titles and abstracts together to be like a trailer for a movie. And I hate trailers that show me the whole movie. And particularly when they include bits from the end of the movie, so you can guess what the movie is going to turn out like. I think titles and abstracts for conference papers are an advertising genre that should make people excited and interested to find out something. And I certainly would not give them what they're going to find out in terms of the overall takeaway, unless it's something very controversial that might annoy people and get people in. Because what you're basically doing is you're fighting in an attention economy for people. You're trying to grab their interests. That's my take on it.
Okay.
Linda.
Linda?
Linda, we can't hear you. The sound's not coming through. Do you want to put it in the chat, Linda? And then we'll...
It sounds like a Muppet.
Okay, Linda, we can't hear you. Put it in the chat and then somebody can read it out to me because I don't have the chat open in front of me. Okay, so I want to go back to the two abstracts, the two title examples. The one was semantic twiz as instructional design in CS education using PRIMM. And the feedback that we gave to this particular author is exactly what Pavel raised. The fact that we don't know what these abbreviations mean. They're situating this in a particular field, and we don't have access to that field. So what they need to do is they need to weaken the semantic density into a form that is simpler, more accessible, in everyday language. And so the revised version was how LCT informs instructional design for teaching computer science. And then during the talk, you get to learn what PRIMM means and so on. The other example that I wanted to just pick up on was the exploration of the challenges to student success in a nursing program at a University of Technology in South Africa. They're locating that really in their particular context, this kind of university in this kind of context. Does it matter? We asked this particular team to weaken the semantic gravity and not make it so context specific. And their revised title, I think, a lot more catchy, a lot more inviting, a lot more accessible, using specialization to enhance student success in a nursing program. So
I want to add to that, Lee, because this is, I think, one of the biggest things that people do wrong is that they exclude people by making their focus, by being really, really, really super specific about what they're talking about. So you can be specific later on when you explain what your topic, your data is, or where you studied, or things like that. But I mean, if somebody said, here's an example, in a paper that I wrote with Patrick Locke, a former PhD student of mine, the first draft he wrote vocational education in Australia, and I put a circle around it and said, you've just lost 98% of the potential audience with 4 words. Vocational education in Australia, because why should anyone else, anywhere else, care? And so what we did was we started somewhere else. We started with much bigger issues about marketization of education, which everyone experiences. So we didn't lose the audience. And then we used the vocational education in Australia as the example of this big problem or big issue that everyone experiences. So I think when people put type of university, country, topic area, and everything else, they feel they're being very academic and specific, but they're also ruining the chances of most people coming and listening or reading the paper, because no one cares about your particular kind of university or particular subject area or particular level or whatever it is, except those very few people who are going to read your paper anyway. And what you want is a lot of other people to come along because they're interested in the general issue that you can contribute to. Because I think all of the papers that all of you guys will write or present will all be able to contribute to conversations that are far bigger than just a specific type of education institution or the subject area you're in or anything like that. It's you can everything you do, because you're using LCT, will be able to inform people looking at much bigger issues. So I think really try and avoid that level of specificity in a title and the start of an abstract and the start of a paper. But of course you have to include it somewhere, but just don't put people off immediately. That's my thoughts anyway. I think it's a really important point, Lee.
Okay, great, thanks. We're going to we're going to follow up on that exact issue, and we're going to have a look at other cases of that. So that's a really great starting point. So
Maybe,
yeah,
sorry, maybe if I can add something. I was also
please.
thinking when I saw number 5, it was on the previous slide, right? I was thinking, I would be interested in exploring success so that I can apply to my students. And okay, nursing program, I can kind of live with that. But then if we layer on University of Technology and South Africa, I'm thinking, the factor is going to be very specific to a program at University of Technology rather than at another university. And then given South Africa complex history, will that be a factor that altogether I cannot apply whatever the finding is to my context?
Yeah. And that's a very different kind of logic to why you know, sometimes if you're writing a journal paper, you want to bring unique insights from your context, sometimes, but it's quite exclusionary. And it's not that advert that draws people in. Okay. So you're sitting there, you know, there's 200 delegates, and you glancing now to see what interests you for the next session. And I want to suggest that when you are in the conference, and you know, you might have a good look at abstracts beforehand and see, oh, maybe I'm interested in this and this and this, but actually in the moment when you're now walking from the tea venue to the rooms, you just have the slightest glance. So the first sentence or two is really the hook that either pulls you in or pushes you away. And I want to look at 4 examples here, and say which hook, you know, which starting sentence is one that really entices you. Out of those 4, which ones would you go to? Okay, anyone want to talk about how they responded to number 1?
I'm gonna jump in here and say something. Like I do a lot of improv comedy, so it's improvisational comedy where you make it all up on stage. And one of the things you're taught is never to go on and on and on about characters that are not on stage, because what the audience starts to think of is, so if I'm imagine me and Lee are on stage together and we're talking about somebody called John. Well, very quickly you just wonder why the hell John isn't on stage, because we are interested in this person being spoken about. Number 1 immediately makes me go, why are we hearing this bit, not the larger project?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I know what's causing that. That's caused by a feeling of illegitimacy that makes you want to. Can you mute Linda?
I'm going to.
It's a feeling of illegitimacy that makes you want to say, "Oh, there's a bigger project," but it's saying like it starts pointing to something that you're not going to talk about, and also makes your project that you're going to talk about seem really small. That's how I would read those first words. I wouldn't get beyond the comma, to be honest.
Yeah. I stopped at the comma, Carl. I read up to the
Yeah.
comma and felt, and in this attention economy, let me see if another one draws me more.
Mm-hmm.
I would also do the same thing with the second one, which is like, oh, masters, fuck off.
Exactly.
You know, I wouldn't even bother with it. Yeah.
Maybe so what if that bit was removed and the sentence was just, this article is guided by the following question, and then the question presented?
Well, this would be a very
why?
personal response, but I would shoot myself in the head if I read anything that began, this article. It would be like writing, this essay is about, oh, that's so boring. Can you please mute Linda?
I did, and let me just do it again.
It's like having a smirk. Please stop talking, Linda.
Linda,
Please stop talking. You sound like a smirk. Thanks.
wait.
Can I? Oh no, bad.
She is muted. I don't understand. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Oh, hang on now. There we go.
If I can just come in here with some wisdom that my my PhD supervisor shared with me many times. She said, that's Lee, by the way. She said, she taught me in my undergrad. She said, Dale, I've spent 4 years teaching you how to teach, and now I have to teach you and unteach you that when you write research, you go from the big problem to the specifics. So for me, number 3 does that. Number 4 kind of does it, but it's too specific for Australian universities. It loses me there. But number 3 puts the big thing that's affecting very, very, very many people, which is the theory-practice divide, up front.
That's dead right, Dale. I mean, I think that anybody who writes an abstract or even anything should begin from a problem, which is an LCT mantra, but also do one that everyone shares, so that everyone wants to join in. You know, they want to go to it despite the fact that you're looking at something very different to themselves. You know, and it may not even be their research, a research overlap. They just might think, oh yeah, that happens to me in my classroom. So theory practice divide, everyone suffers from. So that gets you straight in. But the danger really is that you have to be very specific quickly after that, because otherwise it could sound like a very, very, very vague paper. And you should never have like a paper that's called something like the theory practice divide, because that is an absolute no-no, because you're not going to be discussing it, because that would be 2,500 years of intellectual history. So you wouldn't be able to do that. So, but it's a great start, that one, I think. What do you think, other people?
So just to clarify, if we go back to number 2, and if we started just with the question, what variations in symmetric gravity are found in, that would be too specific, Karl, you would say?
Say that again?
So if number 2, the opening sentence was just a question, what variations in symmetric gravity and so on?
Oh, God. I created LCT. If someone started a paper with what variations in symmetric gravity, I'd want to shoot them. It's like they've already alienated 99% of the audience. It's like no one's got a clue what symmetric gravity is. And I don't know what they mean by it yet. So that would be appalling as a start.
For me, number 2, what I would like, I've got a tool and I want to show you how I'm using it, but not why I'm using it and what it shows me and what it actually does. What does this variation show? So I want to hear that first. For me, the number 1 just screams, I've got all this data and I'm wanting to tell you about this data that I've collected. Number 2, it's like, I've got a tool, I want to play with it, I want to show you what it does, but not why I'm using it. Number 3, Dale has really contributed a really nice insight there. I want to pick up on number 4 and take that further. So if we look at number 4, and I think Hanley said already, so much of it was such specifics at a particular context. And so when you're reading it, basically, you just like, this is all about my context. And okay, so I don't teach at a Australian university. We don't have something called EDI. That's not the term that we use here. It would be totally alienating for me. And so when we gave this person feedback, we said to them, start with that problem and then let it lead you to your study, just the way that came up in our discussion. And this was their revised first couple of sentences, where they really start to talk about how cultural identity can be a site of struggle. And this is one of the places, is in the workplace. And so you need these mechanisms for dealing with difference. Now I'm in. Now I'm in because there's, yeah, the cultural clashes in the workplace. Yeah, that's something I can relate to. And now what does your paper do? Does anybody want to
Can I
just,
give an example of this that might
yeah,
help as well? Another example. So I was working with Saul Richardson, who did a PhD under my supervision, and he did his work on jazz education, the jazz improvisation. So it's the teaching of jazz, and particularly the teaching of jazz improvisation, improvisational jazz. Okay, so that's a topic that absolutely nobody's of interest to, interest to almost nobody, like maybe one person per million or something. I mean, it interests me, but it's not going to interest 99% of any educational audience, really. So when I was working with him on doing an abstract for a roundtable conference talk about 10 years ago, I said to him, look, actually what it is that your study is of a particular kind of, it's a very strong Noah code, right? And what it really is a sort of form of hyper-constructivism. So it's really strong constructivism. So what we did was we rewrote the abstract to say about how student-centered education is moving much, much faster and more powerfully towards, very quickly towards student-centered forms of education and constructivism and so on. And then jazz became this sort of example of how everything's going to end up if we keep going down that direction. And so anybody and everybody who's engaged in education, in higher education at all, which is the audience, by the way, would be interested in that, whereas most people wouldn't be interested in particularly in jazz. So you can, you can find really interesting problems to which you contribute that aren't just the little tiny topic, but also bigger and bigger topics. You contribute to bigger and bigger topics. And if you start thinking like that, you can start to see yourself as part of a much bigger conversation and to feel that sense in which your work has ripples outwards, as well as being able to potentially grab people's interests as well.
Thanks, Carl. That's a great example. So then let's have a look at how do you get to that underlying problem that we all relate to? And these are personally the things that I've found useful in trying to get from the focus of my study to what's that underlying problem. I think to myself, what do I want to change? What is the struggle here? Who's struggling with what? What's not working? What is it that I want my research to do? Or the other thing that also I use to try and get to that underlying problem is what makes me feel angry or frustrated or sad or hopeful. And then once we've got that, it's then how does that problem manifest in the context, in my context? So let me just give you another example of taking that big problem, then taking it into my context, and then eventually into my study. So here we've got the big problem is that so much is being expected of education. And so there've been all these curriculum innovations like problem-based learning, but there's a concern that they emphasize contextual relevance at the expense of principles that can transcend the context. So there we've got the big problem. How is that problem manifesting in my context? Well, now we go into a specific field. How two knowledge fields, anatomy and physiology, were merged into a subject, human biology. And then what's the thing with this study? What's the contribution of this study? How does curriculum shape access to professional knowledge? So there again, it's just an example of how they've started with the big problem. What's that, you're working with disciplines with very different ways of producing knowledge and then looking at their big question. So from there, where do we go? I want to suggest that we think about structuring our abstract. In fact, even our talks, the presentations themselves, as semantic waves, where we start with a big problem that affects us all. We then go into what this big problem looks like in my field, in my context, in my practice. What I'm doing about it, the purpose of my study, the participants, the data. What LCT you used, why you used it, how you used it, briefly in the abstract. But remembering that every LCT technical term, you need to gloss its meaning. You need to give a very brief indication of what you mean by that.
What Lee means by that, by the way, is don't start using up abstract space by defining concepts at great length. It's just things like, I am using semantic gravity brackets, which looks at context dependence, close brackets, and semantic density, open brackets, which looks at issues of complexity, close brackets. That's enough.
Yeah.
Not semantic gravity is the context dependence of meaning, and it can blah, 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 blah. No, you don't. That's for the paper, not for the abstract. A gloss is just like a few words. That's all you need.
Pull out your findings, your conclusion, and then go back to the big problem. What is the significance of your findings for the field, for the problem, for, what did LCT show? What did you learn about LCT? But, taking back in terms of what did your study, what does it add in terms of understanding that big problem?
Lee, do you want to make can you like mute Sego, or you can make me co-host and I can do that sort of thing.
Okay.
Whichever's easier. Because they joined and they inadvertently got their sound on, which keeps banging away.
Thanks. Thanks very much. Okay, so I want you to just think about those kind of steps in your abstract as really a way of making your problem clear, your study clear, and making it relevant to the delegates. So I want to show you what this looks like in practice. And I'm taking one of my master's students. Her big problem was around global literacy and what happens if children can't read by the time that they leave the elementary grades. And the big problem in this context is that many South African children can't read for meaning, and we need to make sure that the teachers can distinguish between prevalent but ineffective teaching practices. So what did she do? She examines lesson observation reports where they're watching a literacy lesson at the beginning of their degree and at the end of the degree. How she used LCT. She starts to say she presents a thematic analysis of the lessons. Actually, it was a constellation analysis, but I don't think she needed to use constellations in this context. And then she uses semantic density. And what I want you to see there is, do you see how she's just glossed a concept that reveals complexity? So just an indication of what that semantic density means to analyze. She gives her findings. about what the fourth years could do that the first years couldn't. And then she revisits the significance of those findings. And there you've got that beautiful semantic wave from a big problem to what she did and to the findings and what this means for her practice. I want to talk about how to navigate a conference presentation and drawing together an abstract when you've got a massive, massive PhD study or a large project which has lots of different parts, and you've used lots of different dimensions, and you've got lots of different data sets and so on. And it's like a whole big embroidery with lots and lots of things coming together and lots of different things happening. And I want to suggest that when you do an abstract and when you do a conference presentation, that even though the rest of your project is so amazing and it's so complex and it's got all these, and together it makes this beautiful, beautiful tapestry or embroidery, it's too much for a conference presentation. And what you need to do is not be tempted to give a summary of your PhD or a summary of your master's or a summary of a large project. It's far better to situate what you're doing in the large picture if you want to, but to take one thread of what you've done and follow that in depth and make a coherent, focused paper, rather than say, well, there was this part and then we collected that data and then we did this and then we did this and then we used semantics here and then we used specialization there and so on. It's just overwhelming. So you know, what does follow one thread mean? It could be one phase of your study, a phase where LCT was particularly important, or one data set, or one set of LCT tools. In other words, just be selective. You don't need to present the entire complexity of everything you did. And the
I'm
second
going to
thing,
jump in and
yeah.
reinforce that point before we move on, which is like, I think most people take 1 point away from a paper, one idea away from a paper. And what you don't want is for them to take the one idea away of this paper is a mess. And that's the one idea that they take away from the paper. And less is more. Absolutely. And I know it's really hard because you're, particularly at the start of your career, you're desperate to prove through credentials. You're desperate to show that you're smart, that you've done everything. You're worried about being criticized for missing stuff out. But actually, it's just becoming more and more of a mess and less likely to be read. And I'll give you an example. Back when Bernstein conferences were a thing, the second conference was funny enough, was in South Africa. It was in Cape Town. I think it was the second one. And I did a paper there, and we only had like 20 minutes. And no one had heard of most of LCT. They'd heard, maybe some people had heard a little bit of what became called specialization, but they hadn't heard of any of the other things. And no one there knew anything about a topic called the new student debate and the creation of the new universities in English higher education in the post-war period. That topic was unknown to just everybody. And in a 20-minute paper, I tried to cover that topic with 4 dimensions of LCT no one had ever heard of before. Now, I did manage it, but when it came to be written up, it was incomprehensible. It was just so much in such a small space of time. And they were going to accept it for the book that came out of that, because they only had 6,000 words as well. So 4 dimensions and a topic no one had heard of, where I analyzed the codes of students coming in, the nature of the thing that they were, blah, blah, blah. It was so complicated. And they said, oh, no, we'll accept it. And I said, no, please don't accept it. And what I did was I cut 3/4 of it out and expanded the one thing, which was the specialization analysis in it. So I got rid of everything else and just did one aspect of it. and made that much more simple and convincing. And that became a paper called The Wrong Kind of Knower. And it's much simpler than it was. The first version was just so complicated because I was so enthusiastic. I was trying to cover so much. And instead, I just did one point. And the great thing about that, by the way, is that you might feel frustrated, but it means you can do loads more papers with all your other points, you know? But I can guarantee you, if you try and pack too much in, no one's going to take anything away from anything. You won't convince anybody of any of it. So give yourself more space. That's what I would say.
Thanks, Carl. The second thing that I want to just emphasize here is that people are coming to see you. When they come to a conference, it's your session. They don't want to spend the first, half of your presentation where you're going through the literature. And this study did this, and this study did something else, and this study, get on with it. They've come to see you. So yes, it's really important to say, I'm focusing on this main idea. It might be curriculum innovation or student support or whatever else, and to clarify what you mean by that and maybe situate it in the literature if you need to. But it's not like a PhD presentation where you've got to prove your mastery of existing literature. So get to the point. What did you do? What did you find? What did the results show you? What did LCT show you? So just remember, people have come to see you. They haven't come to see you speak about everybody else's work. So own your space, prioritize your voice. And then this brings us to the conference. And I just thought it would be a great idea to just touch base on some of the things about the conference that might be useful to share at this point. It's happening in November. It's a 4-day in-person conference that's not online. It's happening at Wits University in Johannesburg, South Africa. We've got a website, lctconferences.com. The sessions are going to be 40 minutes. That's long. Most of the conferences that I attend, they give you 20-minute sessions, if that. And there's a reason why we have 40-minute sessions. We really want to get in depth into your study or a strand of your study, where you're not rushed, where you can really unpack what you did, how you did it, what you found, what does it mean? And we also make sure that there's a good 10-minute time for interaction, discussion with the people who've come. So it's not just a kind of in and rush in, rush out kind of conference. It really does
Another
give you
reason,
space.
Lee, reason that we give people longer is because LCT attracts people who are good at what they're good at research and have something to say. Whereas I've got to say that some of those conferences giving 20 minutes, that's about 18 minutes too much for some people. Certainly for my patients, anyway.
Yeah.
Whereas LCT conferences are full of people who have got good tools, good studies, good data, and can actually provide an explanation or a conjecture of some kind, which is really powerful. They have problems with where it's at. So we want to be able to give you the space to actually explore the problems. And 10 minutes is extra, by the way, to answer that question. It's extra. So no, it's part of the 40 minutes.
Part of
So
the
it's
40
30 minutes
minutes.
presentation, 10 minutes discussion. Then there's 5 minutes between each session. So you have time to move between them and say something to somebody and zip to the loo, whatever. So it's not rushed at all.
Yeah. And I mean, my experience of LCT conferences is that those 10-minute discussions are so rich because people are so engaged and so generous in their feedback and in their questions, and that you come out of their 10-minute discussion and It's almost like somebody's switched on the light because of those the kind of feedback. It's not it's really in-depth feedback. Um, and
And also, they won't stop there
yeah,
because we organise the conference to ensure that it's not split across different sites. People will be coming to you to talk about your paper. They'll be in the same building. They'll see you again. And because we all stay at the same place, unless you live in Joburg, I guess, all stay in the same place, you will see people and people will come up to you and talk to you. So it won't be just 10 minutes and that's it. People will come up and talk about your paper, undoubtedly. People end up talking way into the late in the night, every night of the LCT conference.
that's true. The truth.
Well, to other people, not to me. I just sit there on my own feeling sad with my fake fight.
So at the attached to the call for papers, we do have the LCT6 abstract guidelines, and a lot of the principles that I've been talking about are embedded into these guidelines. So use them. And we really want to encourage you to submit an abstract. We've got 2 dates. The early confirmation is coming up in a couple of days' time, the 27th of March. And our absolute final cut off for this conference will be the 29th of May. So, yeah, that's we hope to see you there. We think it's going to be
All has asked a question. So, will the abstracts be collated and made available prior to the conference in November? Very close to the conference in November, because people are always changing things at the last minute. So, occasionally there's an addition. Occasionally there's somebody's sick or something. So, we try not to collate too quickly. But yeah, they'll be available at the conference and just before, perhaps. But so that you'll have time to be able to look through it when you arrive, or in the day or two before. Probably, what do you reckon, Lee? Day or two
yeah.
before?
We normally give
Thanks,
out the conference books by with the registration, but I think as soon as it's ready, we can certainly upload it onto the conference website.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be great. Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Karl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's all in person. We don't do mixed hybrid, which is neither one thing nor another.
Okay.
Ali, can I ask whether you will possibly be sharing the slides of this session?
We can do that. We can do that. Would that be helpful
Anybody else
to
have any questions for Lee?
Yes, thank you.